Chapter 43. Laura's watch read 1:20 a.m. It was late. Sitting on the street, hugging the precious girl, the weight of Ashley's limp body pressed against Laura, driving impossible guilt into her. Fresh ruby blood leaked out the hole in the girl's head, warming Laura's arms. She hoped to God that she wasn't losing her mind and that this place really was a dream. Living with lies for too long can make you believe them. Laura had been just 1 week in this place, yet it had rooted within her and spread. The experience was more involved than watching an engrossing movie, becoming so in tune with it that you actually live it, jumping when the protagonists are threatened, crying when they are hurt. Her film was a week long, or 168 hours with no intermissions, no bathroom breaks, no commercials, no time away for snacks or naps or conversations, nowhere else to turn your head, second after second, smelling, tasting, touching, hearing, seeing only this world, hour after hour, day after day, growing into the very fabric of Laura's being. She had no sensory awareness of reality anymore. All her senses were connected to this dream. Disconnected from the truth for a week, it was enough to drive a person mad. If she had been here 3 weeks, like the others, she might never be able to leave. She was sent here to monitor the psychological states of the research subjects, but who was monitoring her state? She needed to get out, return to what she barely remembered to be reality. She put the gun to her head, squeezed her eyes shut, as though that might lessen the pain, and pulled the trigger. Click. She cracked her eyes open, feeling unreal. She was still on the asphalt, Ashley's dead weight against her. The gun was heavy in her right hand. She closed her eyes again and pulled the trigger. Click. Click. What the hell? She had run out of bullets already? Click. Okay, that was fine. She could do this. It wasn't that hard to kill yourself. She was, after all, motivated. Even if this was reality, she wanted to die. She didn't want to live if she had just murdered 5 innocent people. She scanned the night. Street lamps illuminated only sections of the street and sidewalk, placed every 40 meters or so. No distinct weapons could be seen lying about. A car was a weapon. If she could run into the street and get hit, she might die. But no cars traveled this residential area this late, and even if one passed by, it would be traveling too slow to ensure death. She had to be positive of success. If she were only paralyzed, she would be unable to finish the job. And with a lesser injury, such as broken legs, she would be delayed so that no one would escape this nightmare. The others would be caught and sent back here with no memory of another place. Sure, they might have a déjà vu of something that may or may not have happened, but no one would be around to guide them to the truth. She wouldn't exist, murdered in reality while she slept. If she drove Jeff Carr into a brick wall at 60 miles an hour with airbags, she still might survive, perhaps trapped in a coma for days, weeks, or even months. Or she might live for hours anyways, slowly dying of internal injuries, again losing her chance to save the others. However, if she brought the Jaguar up to 100 miles per hour, she would die instantly, wouldn't she? She gently lay Ashley to the side and stood up. Running back to the Jaguar, the driver's door was still open. She got inside and pushed the brake and start button. Nothing happened. She still had Jeff Keyes in her blouse pocket, didn't she? Touching the pocket, she discovered them gone. Where had they disappeared to? She looked around the pavement outside, thinking perhaps they fell out when she had tumbled and rolled on the street. Hurry. Where could they be? Hurry, hurry, hurry. The area was not well lit. It was hard to see anything at all. There were some leaves damming the water along the gutter beside the curb, creating a dark puddle. A crumpled beer can rested in the grass beside the sidewalk. No keys visible. Sirens rose in the distance. She hadn't noticed before, but several lights were on in the surrounding homes. Perhaps the residents, having been awakened from the gunfire earlier. It's okay. Be calm. I can do this. This was the easy part. She was the only one left here. She could break into a house, get a knife, and stab her beating heart. But the residents would try to stop her. Her advantage was that she still had the gun. They didn't know it was empty. She could pretend it was loaded and keep everyone far enough away until she cut her wrist and drove the knife into her chest. But what if she missed her heart, or got only a part of it, fainted, and somebody applied pressure to the wounds until an ambulance arrived, in time to race to the hospital, have surgery, and sew her up and save her life? Ah, she groaned. A deep part of her might even create a new character in the dream to save her. Maybe she would break into a doctor's home with medical equipment. She instinctively did not want to die. The suicide method had to be foolproof. Taking precious minutes to plan this out was essential. Everyone waking at the hospital depended on her competence. She wouldn't let them down. The sirens grew louder, closer. Hurry! Laura thought of walking down the street to a dark house, climbing the roof and jumping off head first. It was nighttime, and if she were quiet, no one would hear to call an ambulance. All the houses in this neighborhood were one story, though. She might only get paralyzed or just slowly die over the course of several hours. Damn it. Killing yourself quickly was more difficult than she believed when she had 7 bullets in the gun. She was deep in suburbia, and it would take at least 40 minutes to walk to a well-traveled road at this time of night. If she could get a car. Donald's SUV was banged up, appearing inoperable. He had been unable to start it. She ran to it anyways to try it out. The keys were in the ignition? Yes. Turning them only caused a sick noise. It wouldn't start. But perhaps one of the vehicles parked along the street. She tried a few doors. All were locked. No one left keys in ignitions overnight anyways. She didn't know how to hotwire a car. Even though this was an unreal world, it still had rules like the real world. Hurry, think faster, hurry. She felt dizzy and almost fell over. Recognizing she was hyperventilating, she stopped breathing. Hyperventilating would only confuse her thoughts and slow her down. Then she took a long, deep breath and exhaled slowly. Then another, and another. Slow. Another. Relax. Another. She could do this, but she had to act quickly. Sirens grew louder. She could do this. Just breathe deep. She began to cry. A claustrophobic, confining feeling made Ashley's breathing difficult. For a moment, she thought the dark, gooey substance had enveloped her entire body before Laura could shoot. But then she opened her eyes. A man's face hovered above her, scarred and pocketed with acne. His brown hair was crew-cut, his face scrunched, hazel eyes moist and desiring. Hot exhalations from his open mouth polluted her cheeks. His weight was the reason for her difficulty breathing. His body was crushing her chest. Where was she? Where did Laura make her go? She blinked hard, hoping to wake from this nightmare. But the man was still lying on top of her when her eyes reopened. She blinked harder. Laura was supposed to help, send her into reality, setting her free. Above the man, a fluorescent ceiling light shined. She recognized it as the same as all the hospital rooms she had been in before. To her right was the nightstand with a folded white towel and a black Bible. This is reality. She had made it back to the hospital, but this man wasn't supposed to be here. He appeared surprised, hazel eyes widening. "You're awake?" His breath smelled stale. "Get off me," she huffed. Fear and uncertainty flickered on his face. "You can't be." He grabbed her arms at her sides and forced them into the mattress next to her ears. "Not again! You can't be!" She recognized the man as the janitor. It was difficult to place him at first because he had been too close. Ashley looked down and saw he wore only a white t-shirt and tight blue underpants. She had on only a bra and panties. Sick, empty feelings slithered through her, knowing that while she slept, the stranger had taken off her hospital gown, watched her, touched her, and perhaps worse. She struggled under his crushing weight. His grip tightened around her wrists. His eyes burned with hunger, and he smiled. "It actually feels nice that you're awake." She pulled on her arms, but they didn't budge, most of his weight pressing against her pelvis, stomach, and chest. Her only parts that could easily move were her legs. She kicked and flailed them, and his eyes grew larger, his body pressing heavier against her. He moaned, "You're wonderful!" She hated the musky stink of him. He didn't have her permission to be this close. What the hell was he doing? What was he thinking? How could the hospital allow this? His eyes, glossy and wide, looked like Carlos's eyes. Nauseated, she turned her head to look away. On the floor, between the beds, lay her blue hospital gown. Beside it, his work uniform of brown shirt, brown pants, white socks, and black tennis shoes. The other bed was empty and neatly made. Donald used to be in that bed. He would be awake now since Laura had killed him. Where was he? He could break this pervert in half. The janitor began to breathe against her neck, sending awful cold shivers through her. His brown shirt had a name tag sewn to it. She could read part of the first name from the shirt's wrinkled position. Ron. And then she recalled his full name from before. "Ronald Burns," she blurted. hoping that might stop him, hoping he would be afraid of being reported to the hospital authorities. He lifted his head. She turned to look up at him, trying to look severe from her position. She said, "Get off. I'll tell if you don't leave right now." He laughed. "No worries, sweets. You'll forget all this happened." He rose up slightly and began pulling off his t-shirt. For a moment, resentment burned from Laura waking her up. She thought it would have been better if she had never known about this, but that thought quickly sickened her. Not knowing, being used again and again without her knowledge, was worse. At least now she could try to prevent it. She hated that a part of her life had been a lie. Time had been stolen from her, replaced by a dream to appease her mind while adults used her for whatever they wanted. Who would create a project like this? Not Laura. She doubted Laura even knew about Ron's intentions. Laura would have warned her if she had known. Laura would have stopped him before leaving the hospital. The sharp feeling of stubbles from his chest hair scraping against her body made her squirm. With his shirt halfway over his head and arms occupied, she twisted and freed her shoulders from underneath him, but he yanked the t-shirt off and pushed her back down. "Get off!" "Your neck is so tender," he whispered into her ear, thundering because he was so close. She cringed as his nails dug into her wrist. "You smell so good, fresh, unspoiled." "Please, Ron, use my name again. It makes this so much more intense." She couldn't stand his voice in her ear. It was like he was inside her head, so she turned to face him, and his lips tried for hers. She turned the other way. She remembered Laura's promise to come right after her to the hospital. Laura would be here any second to get this disgusting pervert off her. His tongue slithered along her neck, sending shivers down her spine, and she screamed. He pulled the pillow out from under her head and pressed it into her face. Feeling her breath swarming the cotton fabric, but returning no air, she tried to wriggle her head around in some kind of pocket of air, but there was none. Ashley began to panic. Her arms were free now because he was using his hands to hold the pillow. She pushed up on his body, not even lightening his weight. She dug her fingernails into his back and then tried finding his eyes. She must have got one because the pressure on the pillow released, and she pushed it up with her other hand, took a quick breath, and screamed again. He pressed the pillow back against her. Her lungs ached for air. With the scream, she had wasted the precious little oxygen she had just inhaled. His weight, the pillow, her inability to move, all sent her into a spasmodic panic. The fear had started like a moth fluttering in her chest, growing frantic and heavy, slamming against her ribs, and she involuntarily sucked in for air, finding only fabric, now breathing faster but getting less. Why was he doing this? Didn't he care at all? He must have some goodness in him somewhere. How could he not care about another person so thoroughly? Surely he must be feeling her heart against his chest, sensing her need, understanding he was taking this too far. Maybe he didn't care. But even so, he couldn't possibly want her dead. He wanted to use her. A dead girl couldn't possibly turn him on. But what if he wasn't that smart? What if he accidentally killed her? She punched the stupid man's head as hard as she could, feeling dizzy, arms tingling, lungs burning, but he just pressed the pillow down harder. From intense pressure against her eyes, it seemed like light flashed, like some lunatic rave party. She surrendered to him, going limp, hoping for grace within him. It was all she could do. Crying on a stranger's front lawn, Laura vigorously scrubbed her arms with the wet grass to remove Ashley's drying blood. This evidence was too emotional charged to leave on her arms. "You're being weak," she scolded herself. "Stop it. You're letting yourself get too emotional. Suicide is simple. Just develop a plan and follow through. You're so stupid. This isn't that difficult." She realized she sounded like her alcoholic father, the man she had vowed never to be like. He often rejected her feelings as a girl, telling her she should be stronger and she was better than that. Better than what? Her feelings were important, and she learned this lesson the hard way, not from her father's stern discipline, but from growing up as a woman. In fact, she had to unlearn most of his stifling teachings. She hated that during times of stress, she drifted back into her old ways, her father's critical nature and severe manners. She drifted back into believing feelings were unimportant. Laura smashed her head against the sidewalk as hard as she could. Her vision filled with red and white dots, and her head went from numb to an intense ache in a matter of seconds. Damn it. This was no good either. She would wind up a mindless vegetable, forgetting she was in a dream. Sirens were getting closer. Hurry. She had to break into a house. It was the quickest reasonable possibility to kill herself. She could get a knife, a set of car keys, and maybe a full bottle of Tylenol, just in case the other two methods didn't work. No, forget the bottle, it would take too long. She looked at the house in front of her. No good. The lights were on, curtains swaying open with dark silhouettes peering out. Besides, the police would check all the houses in the vicinity of the murders. She sprinted down the sidewalk. After about a block, she noticed the houses dark on either side. Looking back, flashing red and blue lights from a police cruiser turned onto the street, far enough down, though, so that she would not be spotted in the unlit portion between the street lamps. Not yet, anyways. As the cruiser drew close to the two corpses, Laura ran up the sidewalk and then the walkway of the closest house and tried the front door. Locked, of course. She looked left and found a window by a rose bush. It was partially open. This house would have to do. She didn't want to risk being exposed outside much longer. The police would surely decide to scope the neighborhood for a female meeting her description. Even if they didn't suspect her as the murderer of Ashley and Donald, she would have to explain herself, what she had seen, how she had gotten into the area without her own car, maybe even go down to the police station to be interrogated for wasteful hours. Hurry, hurry. Laura sidled into the small space between the rosebush and the house, put the revolver on the windowsill, and broke off a rose stem. Using one of the sharp thorns, she cut the bottom of the screen. Then she got her fingers through this tear and pulled up, ripping open a flap. She tried opening the window further, but couldn't. There was some sort of locking device inside. The residents didn't anticipate someone breaking in as petite as her, though. She bent down, tilted her head to the side, and squeezed through the opening. That is, until her chest got stuck. She squirmed and made progress, albeit painful progress. A low thud indicated the revolver had fallen from the sill onto the dirt outside. It didn't matter much. The gun was empty. Pressing her hands against the interior wall, she wiggled herself further inside, clearing her chest as blouse buttons popped off, clinking onto the floor. With no bra, she flushed at the thought of a stranger spying her naked breasts. But then she realized she didn't care. Most likely everyone in this world was only her creation now. She flopped onto the hard floor, making too much noise. She waited, listening. The place smelled like freshly made popcorn. Silence suggested no one had been alerted. That was the most important thing. Success was within reach now. The floor felt smooth, but not cold like tile. It was probably hardwood. She took off her heeled sandals to eliminate claps. She had no socks, so she would have good traction on the smooth surface. All she needed was to get to the kitchen. If her luck didn't run out, she would be at the hospital within minutes. In the darkness, she started forward and smacked her left knee into something solid. Oomph! She reflexively bent over, holding the knee as the pain subsided. She lowered herself onto the floor to crawl, so as to best avoid more collisions. Her fingers ran into a single step, and she climbed it. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know where the kitchen was, but it had to be close. The freshly made popcorn scent had surely come from the kitchen. It seemed to be getting stronger. After smacking her forehead into something, she stopped. Her eyes were adjusting somewhat, giving her the ability to see clumps of blackness that were probably furniture. She continued forward, fingers touching an uneven, cold surface. It was hard like tile. Yes, a good sign, as many kitchens are tiled. A glare of light flickered on above her, causing her to squint. It was the kitchen. A man in his mid-20s stood at one entrance ahead of Laura, dressed in only blue, baggy pajama bottoms. He held a baseball bat in his right hand, lean muscles rippling his body, informing he could use that bat with deadly force. She could see him gaping at her bare breasts, which were exposed from her open blouse. Hopefully, he was in shock so Laura could formulate her next move. She said, "Hi," as flirty as she could muster. She moved from her hands and knees into a sexy squat, desiring to hold his dumbfounded gaze, and then stood, extending her buttocks out and flexing her calves through her snug black leggings, all the while scanning the kitchen for a knife. The white countertops were clean. No dirty dishes lay about. No knives around. He cleared his throat and asked slowly, "What are you doing here?" "Oh," Laura thought quickly, "I just wanted to use your phone. I don't have a cell. I'm sorry." "You can't expect me to believe that." He looked around the kitchen, his eyes twitching in their sockets. "Anyone else with you?" "No," she said without hesitation, not wanting him to be alarmed. "Just me." She smiled seductively and took 2 steps on her tippy toes toward the countertop, calves still flexing. "I actually just need something to get my gas cap off. I'm empty and it's stuck. Maybe..." She placed one finger to her mouth and with her other hand opened a drawer. Just large spoons and ladles were inside. If you have something pointy? The man came forward into the kitchen with the bat held high. Back away from the drawers. Laura opened another one. I just need... Now. From his insistency, she must have been close to the knives. Okay, don't get excited. She grinned, holding her shoulders back so that her open blouse revealed more of her bare stomach and breasts. He watched her carefully as he picked up the phone from the countertop. I think I'll let the police decide what's going on here. Police would cause too much delay. He might beat her to death if he felt his life was in danger. Maybe she could entice him to attack. She ran at him, screaming. Stop! He raised the bat, but as she got closer, he dropped it and the phone and grabbed her. She had to break into that nice guy's house. This was no good. So she increased the threat, kicking him in the shins, then drove her knee between his legs. He tried turning, but was too late. Her knee landed in his crotch, curling him to the floor, revealing a woman standing behind him in the doorway. She wore only a guy's white t-shirt, falling to her upper thighs. She was a couple of inches taller than Laura, perhaps 5 feet 8 inches, with jet black hair. Her legs were cut with lean muscles, like a gymnast. The woman's eyebrows curled inward, teeth bared, face red. As Laura reached for another drawer, the woman sprang, and before Laura could open it all the way, she was pushed into the countertop, her lower back twisting in pain. The woman pulling Laura's hair, smashing her head against a cabinet. Laura recovered and elbowed the woman in the side, causing her to bend over and release her grip. Laura turned from her and yanked open 2 more drawers, spotting measuring cups, envelopes, spices, egg beaters, nail polish, rubbing alcohol, cooking thermometers, and a long fork, but no knives. She picked up the fork. It would have to suffice for now. The man was standing and raising the bat again. I don't want to hurt you, he warned. She screamed as loud as possible to incite him to attack. I'm going to kill your bitch. With her left hand, she picked up a toaster and threw it at him, aiming for his body, but hitting him squarely in the head, and he unexpectedly fell to the floor, unconscious. Damn! Before she could turn back to the woman, she was hit in the head with something hard, causing her to drop the fork. Lightning flashed through her skull as she fell onto her hands and knees. The woman was atop her back. Laura bucked, but the woman grabbed her right arm and bent it back and up. Her other arm failed, crushing her into the floor, driving air from her lungs. The woman grabbed Laura's loose arm and pulled it back as well. As quick as a cat, she scooted up, wedging her knees underneath Laura's shoulders, incapacitating her. Laura couldn't allow this. It was an unacceptable delay. She tried twisting her body out, but the woman's weight kept her pinned. The white tile floor filled Laura's vision. She felt failure sapping her remaining strength. Everyone depended on her to get to the hospital. Frank, the woman yelled. The man moaned. You all right? Yeah. Call the police. Laura's chest tightened. She felt hot and unable to breathe. He asked, You all right? Yeah, the woman answered. He moaned again. Keep her down. She's insane. Although she couldn't see Frank, Laura heard beeps from a phone. She turned her head left, and the woman's bent knee and thigh loomed there, blocking sight of Frank. Long black hair dangled over Laura's face, tickling. What the hell are you doing here? Even with the woman's weight constricting her lungs, Laura breathed faster. trying to inhale more air. She didn't want to be in this position. It made her feel defeated and humiliated. Hot tears rolled out the corners of her eyes. "What do you want from us?" She couldn't explain. They wouldn't understand, ever. She tried turning out from underneath the woman again, tried pulling her arms free, but it was futile. Now the police would come. How was she going to get back to the hospital? The others needed her to escape. She had promised Ashley she would come right after her. Already 30 minutes must have passed. How could she have failed at killing herself? People kill themselves every day. She didn't want to accept her predicament. She had to believe there was still a way.